And you're back with In Session and Florida versus Dylan Wisniewski. I'm Jean Casares in for Vinnie Politan. This trial brings up a lot of questions about children and teens using firearms. The defendant in this case never attended a gun safety class. But could it have helped save Ashley Swayze's life? Or are kids just too young to mentally handle the responsibility of a weapon? Helping us address those questions are Sergeant Karsten Cheney. He is the SWAT commander of the Fulton County, Georgia Sheriff's Department. Also with us, clinical and forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober. Thank you both for joining us. I first want to talk to Sergeant Cheney. And I know you have some things with you to tell us and teach us about gun safety. But I first want to ask you, what's the issue here? Is the issue that someone who is 18 or a youth should not have a gun at all in their possession, or is the issue that you need to be trained, you need to go to a training course?
I think it's not so much the age of the individual, but it's all about discipline, maturity, education as far as the firearm is concerned, about the operational functioning of it, and the liability that you take when you put a firearm in your hand. And also training is the biggest part of it.
You know, to Dr. Bober, I was doing a little bit of research, and this case is in Florida, and the State of Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission has free gun safety courses for children. They're free. Anybody can go. They start when you're in kindergarten, believe it or not, and it's Learn Gun Safety, Outdoor Ethics, and Wildlife Conservation with Barney. And the cardinal rule for these children starting in kindergarten is a gun is not a toy. Would that have made a difference if Dylan had gone to these courses?
Well, I agree with the sergeant to a certain extent. I think it is a matter of discipline and training. But what we know from basic neuroscience is that the brain develops from the back to the front. And the last part of the brain that develops is called the prefrontal cortex. And that doesn't probably finish developing until your early 20s. And that is the part of the brain that says, wait, stop, I need to think about this before I do it. I need to put the brakes on. Now, that doesn't mean that all 18-year-olds shouldn't have guns, but it does mean that in the case of this particular 18-year-old, he very well may have lacked the maturity to own a firearm. Now, a lot of these immaturity factors can be dealt with through training, discipline, through structure, through routine. So I think the fact that his parents did not provide him with a gun safety course, the fact that he didn't check to see if the firearm was loaded, the fact that he didn't check to see if the safety was on, are all factors that led to this girl's death that could have been prevented with training. So I do agree with the sergeant to a certain extent, but once again, the brain of an 18-year-old is just not that of an adult from a neurological perspective.
Now, in Florida, these courses are not required. They are not mandatory. But Dylan's mother, Janelle Wisniewski, she spoke with Christy Paul on this very issue of safety education. Take a listen.
Definitely gun safety. I really wish that I would have done that now. But I think gun safety, and just to drill it in your head that all guns are loaded, and even if a friend is playing with a gun, don't play with guns. I mean, gun safety, I think, is definitely something that should, be pushed for sure.
And the parents want this lesson to be taught and listened to by people all over this country. Joining us today, Sergeant Karsten Cheney, who is the Fulton County Sheriff's Department SWAT commander. Now, you have brought with you some, they're not real guns, they're fake, but they can help educate us and show us what needs to be done, what should be done to practice good gun safety.
Yes, ma'am.
We're ready. Put them up. Give us the demonstration.
All right, basically this is what we call a red gun. It's just made out of hard plastic, and it's a replica of a Glock 22, and that's what our agency issue our deputies once they go to the mandate class. And once they first get there, we issue them duty belt and, of course, the holster, and they walk around with this plastic gun in their holster just to get a feel for it. And actually, the weight of it is pretty much the weight of a loaded firearm as far as a Glock 22.
Now, why do you do that? Why do you have prospective officers just walk around to feel it in the holster, feel it in the waistband of their pants. What does that prove? What does that do?
Well, a lot of officers come in just basically haven't had any kind of exposure to a firearm. So therefore, we want them just to get accustomed to walk around with it, just to start feeling secure with it, start respecting it. And basically, it's just taking baby steps for the people that just comes in without any kind of training. Unlike we get people in from other previous law enforcement agencies or the military where they're not intimidated by the weapon. So therefore, they usually get through training without not a lot of coaching, so to speak.
That's interesting how you start with just basics like that to develop the respect. Now, we've learned through the testimony that Dylan didn't check to see if it was loaded, didn't check to see if the safety was on, didn't do any of that, was pointing it either at Ashley's feet or over her shoulder. What can you demonstrate for us to just show some of those aspects that that's not what you want to do when you have a gun?
Well, definitely, you never point a weapon at anything or anyone that you don't intend to shoot. And you should always treat a weapon as if it's loaded. Always make sure the weapon is unloaded. And as far as this gun is concerned, which is a Glock, you should always, or semi-automatic, you should always drop the magazine first before you rack the round out of the chamber. And what usually happens is a person racks the round out of the chamber, and by the magazine being in it, it automatically feeds another round into the chamber. So when you think the chamber is clear and you drop the magazine, actually there's a round in the chamber.
Right, and that's what he didn't know.
Right.
That is what he had no idea on. Dr. Bober, you know, his parents did a lot of things right because Dylan's parents kept the gun in their bedroom. It was kept locked. The bullets were separate. They were locked. But once Dylan reached 18, his mother found this gun rack at a garage sale and decided that he could prominently display the gun in the bedroom that he shared with his little brother. Should parents, number one, and maybe I will ask the sergeant this, but let me ask you, is there a responsibility on the parent to determine if your child has the maturity to keep a gun in their bedroom, or should that never be done, even with gun safety courses?
Well, you know, it's a little bit of a complicated question. I mean, the fact that Florida has no legal requirement for a gun safety course doesn't really move me because, you know, people get a driver's license, but if someone kills someone with a car and they just got their license, they're held to the same standard as someone who's been driving for 20 years. So the fact that there's no legal requirement to me doesn't really matter. If you're going to have a firearm in your home, you have to be properly trained. And if you're a parent and you know your child has a firearm, then it's your responsibility as a parent to adequately supervise them and to make sure that they have the proper training. Now, as far as keeping a firearm in the bedroom, you know, that makes me a little nervous, but, you know, with proper training and discipline, I think it's something that I could see happening. But when there's another child in the home that's a young child, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I think you have to look at the situation on a case-by-case basis before you make that determination.
Let's go to Sergeant Cheney, because I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about a parent allowing a child, yes, he was 18, but he was a child, to keep this gun in this small bedroom mounted on a rack where there was a minor brother in the bedroom? Should that just never be done? Should the parent keep the gun stored, locked, unless we use it together?
That's kind of an opinionated question, and I agree with the doctor. If there's a younger child in the house, and if you are going to store it on a rack in a bedroom, I would definitely keep it unloaded, and I would definitely keep a gun lock in it. Also, I would expose that younger child to the same thing that I exposed the older child to, depending on what age he is. I mean, so
right. Right. Talk to us
said,
about a gun lock, because we haven't heard that, and that is one alternative, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. And basically what this is a cable lock, and it's for pistols, and it also can be used with rifles, those that have external magazines. And basically, if the magazine was out and the slide was locked to the rear, what you would do is run it up through the magazine well and out through the ejection port, and then just lock it as such. Therefore, no one will be able to insert a magazine, or even if a magazine was in it, it's not going to be able to chamber around. That's one of the ways you could do it. Or you can just, if the slot was locked to the rear, you could run it down through the chamber and out through the barrel and hook it as such.
And
So
that lock right there shows this is to be given respect. So that is a symbol right there that can be everlasting in a child's mind or young adult. What else do you have with you that you can demonstrate to us before we go today to teach us a few things?
Right. And basically, this is a lock box. It's a key lock box. You can get it from any store, Walmart or any hardware store. Of course, you always want to make sure the weapon is safe before you put it in the box, especially if you're going to put it on a shelf, because a lot of people tend to not want to take the box down. They just reach inside and grab the weapon out. And therefore, if it's still loaded, you risk the chance of unintentionally pulling the trigger. One thing I would recommend, though, this particular box right here has a key to it. I would recommend something with a combination lock on it because, of course, kids are going to be inquisitive and start searching through their parents' things and just so happen running across the key. Therefore, they're able to unlock it. But if it was a combination lock on it...
And let me stop you right there because a rifle obviously won't fit in that box. Do you recommend that a rifle is stored in a hard case or a soft case?
I would recommend that a rifle be stored in a gun safe, an actual wide, larger size gun safe.
Okay.
With a combination lock. Or if you're going to store it on the rack, like I said, depending on what kind of rifle it is, it might have an external magazine. You can actually run this cable down through there and secure it pretty much the same way that you did the handgun.
All right. Very, very good advice. Sergeant Karsten Cheney from the Fulton County Sheriff's Department, SWAT commander, joining us today, as well as clinical and forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Bober. Fascinating information, both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.